You're doing well. So how many wipes is your gummy?
On that's like a scale of 1 to what?
1 to 5.
This gummy is I'm gonna say it's like a 4 wiper, man.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, let's tie this up then. Let's get
it took me way over the edge.
Okay, so let's get out of here then. Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap it up then.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower after Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Chat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time, decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit chatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Chat on TV. Review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at chatpod.com/TV. And finally, if you like to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, chatpod.com/Twitch, and our YouTube channel where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
So, Gene, I wonder, when people go to our feed, if they just find the films that they know, that they've watched, the big ones, do you think there's a chance that a portion of our listeners go for like the oddball films and say, hey, I haven't seen this, maybe I could be sold on it?
I think we've heard from enough listeners like Paul in Middlesbrough who say, I see what's coming up on the calendar, which, by the way, you can check that out at chatpod.com/movies and go to the calendar, see what's coming up. I don't know what that movie is, but I'm going to watch it so that I have context for when you guys do the pod. And there's other people who've written in and said, I heard the episode about such and such movies, so I went and watched it. So I think there's a fair amount, but just as many people who are just looking up their favorite movies, which is something I would be guilty of.
Yeah, and I hope, because tonight's film is a perfect example of that. It's a film that neither one of us was really familiar with. I don't know that I would have made time in my busy week to sit down and watch it. But now that we did, I'm really glad that we did. When people ask for films that maybe surprised me, I will list this one. So people, if you have a friend, push in this direction. Help them find some movies that they may have missed growing up. And that's why I was excited. Very excited because Robin wrote in and commissioned a film that was not on our radar. And it is great that we had a chance to watch it. So she asked us to go back to 1985 and to review the American black comedy After Hours. And she was kind enough to call in and give us a voicemail on why this film was worth a commission and helping and supporting us. So here's Robin.
Hi, Chat Crew. This is Robin, and I wanted to thank you so much for letting me commission Martin Scorsese's After Hours. It was a 1985 movie, and back then I was about 13, and I wasn't really into this type of film. I was into, The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, stuff like that. Great movies came out that year, but this was kind of not on my radar, but the adults in my life really loved it. And so I was intrigued. And as I got into college, it was cycling through cable. And so I gave it a watch and absolutely fell in love with the cinematography, the dark humor, the cast is great. Kind of a funny, crazy ride to watch, kind of a fun watch. Anyway, so does it hold up? I'm going to say parts of the story, yes, but in all, probably not, because this entire scenario could not exist with the advent of smartphones. So if you could take yourself back to a time where there was just payphones or landlines, then you'd really appreciate this movie, or at least parts of it. Yes, it gets a little sleepy at times, but it's got some really funny parts, crazy parts, and a lot of funny, quotable lines. Again, thank you so much for letting me commission it. I absolutely love the podcast. I've been listening since almost the very beginning. And I even sort of miss Roger's giggle every now and then. Thanks again. And I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy.
Robin, I think I detect a slight accent there, which kind of reminded me of Ash's drawl a little bit. So a lot of nostalgia going on in this episode. Big D, have you ever asked a kid, or not ever, but recently asked a kid to act like they're picking up a phone?
No, like
have you seen this phenomenon? Yeah,
no,
it's wild. So I just saw it the other day, and I've been having a lot of fun, like asking kids to do this. But basically, you or I, if they say, "Hey, act like you're picking up a phone," we do this, right? Yeah. And by the way, people, I'm doing like the hang loose hand, but like with the thumb to my ear and the pinky to my mouth. The kids, they do this, like they're holding a cell phone.
Oh,
they don't even remember. Like they never held a receiver. They don't know.
Yeah.
And it's just wild. I mean, I feel so old. But Robin, you mentioned, that this scenario could not happen with the advent of the cell phone. I would counter that there have been times when my phone died and I fell into similar situations. Like you watch people when their phone dies in public, it becomes an all-out panic. They got to find, chargers. Anybody have a battery? How am I going to get home? It's a whole ordeal.
Right. And I don't think it's necessarily better or worse. It's a different set of challenges. Today, of course, you'd be able to find a method of transportation to get back home, but you also would be missing out on some of the interactions that back in the day, we'll get into it, you were almost forced to have, and it was more exciting. I know I'm the old man, like clamoring for the days gone by, but I think we'll get into it, and I think we both miss the adventures that you could find on a late night in New York City, and you'd never knew what was going to happen.
Well, Big D, I think you and Robin are about the same age, so you might be the dominant voice on this pod. After Hours is a 1985 dark comedy directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Joseph Minion, and produced by Amy Robinson, Griffin Dunne, and Robert F. Colesbury. Dunne stars as Paul Hackett, an office worker who experiences a series of misadventures while attempting to make his way home from Manhattan's Soho district during the night. After Hours was critically acclaimed and is now considered to be a cult classic. As of 2025, and this is fascinating, it is Scorsese's most recent film that is not an adaptation or a biopic. The film won the Independent Spirit Award for Best Feature. Scorsese won the Cannes Film Festival for Best Director and the Independent Spirit Award for Best Director for the film. So, Big D, you mentioned that this might have been a movie that we wouldn't have necessarily watched if Robin hadn't commissioned it. But after we reviewed King of Comedy for the podcast, I was excited to see that it had all the elements of another Scorsese movie I wanted to watch. 1985, so it's that same King of Comedy era, dark comedy. It's set in New York City, and having that broadened view of what he's capable of creating. Because before King of Comedy, I just associated Scorsese with like gangster flicks, right? So knowing that he could do this oddball stuff, knowing that he could really play up on mental illness, on people's quirks, and the city of New York, I was excited to have to go.
So if you go back to 85, I'm thinking of it now. Why do some films just go over our head and we don't see them? Without the trailers, without online promotion, without catching the random commercial that might have a trailer, the only way you'd find out about a movie was going into your local newspaper, you would flip it open, and you would see the small little picture of the poster. If a movie didn't capture you with that poster art, you would be lost. If it didn't convey immediately what it was, and maybe this is why I didn't see it. We've reviewed 3 O'Clock High. That poster and cover art looks just like it. It is the drawing of the clock, a guy looking like he's confused, his head's being twisted, the script. It reminds me a lot of the 3 O'Clock High that I don't know what the plot's about. I'm not going to go and see it. So I never saw it, never heard of it, never had an inkling to pick up the box and rent it. I never even knew Martin Scorsese had done this film, Gene, until it was commissioned. So this wasn't even on my radar back in 85 or anywhere near the last 30, 40 years.
There's a small part of me that worries that my mom might have rented like all of these movies that I think I haven't seen. And just because I didn't get it, like it never stuck, right? So like I remember like Revenge of the Nerds. I remember Young Einstein, right? I remember movies like that because I was a kid and those things appealed to me. But like if you asked me if I've seen Dangerous Liaisons or Bonfire of the Vanities? Maybe. To me, that's all the same movie. I was a little kid. All right, Big D, with that, let's hit the trailer.
Why don't you just go home?
I've been asking myself that one all night long.
So what happened? Why can't you?
I met this girl tonight, okay, in a coffee shop.
I feel like something incredible is really going to happen here.
So when I got home, I gave her a call. On the cab on the way down here, all my money flew out the window. I didn't really get along with her that well.
What's the matter?
I said, I want to see a plaster of Paris bagel and cream cheese paperweight. Now cough it up. So I left. Kiki! So I haven't got enough money to get home until I meet this bartender who wanted to lend me the money. That's all right, forget it. It's all right.
Poor boy.
So I go back to the girl's apartment, but her roommate's really pissed off at me for the way I treated her friend.
This the guy?
Hi. So I march right in there to apologize. Come on! But she'd already killed herself. I was too late.
Oh, wow.
Lighten up! What is this?
I'm in big trouble. Big trouble! Now this part, you're gonna say, oh, you're lying to me. Don't lie to me, but it's true. Mohawk this guy! I couldn't believe that. That's him! Tell him, it's not my fault. I didn't do it.
I gotta tell who you didn't do what.
Help! 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 Call the police!
What's with you? Are you nuts or something?
Luckily, there was this girl who saw the whole thing.
You're dead, pal.
And what? So now she's the one in the Mr. Softy ice cream truck who's trying to kill me. They're all trying to kill me. I just wanted to leave. My apartment, maybe meet a nice girl. And now I've got to die for it, What do you want from me? What have I done? I'm just a word processor, damn it.
Is that all there is?
After hours, when anything can happen, and usually does.
Is that unbelievable or what?
That's all there is, my friend. Then let's keep...
After a boring day at work, Paul Hackett strikes up a conversation with a stranger named Marcy in a cafe in New York City. Marcy tells him that she is living in Soho with a sculptor named Kiki Bridges, who makes and sells paperweights resembling cream cheese bagels. Paul takes a taxi to Marcy's apartment later that night, but his $20 bill is blown out the window of the cab, so the driver kicks him out. At the apartment, Paul meets Kiki, who is working on a sculpture of a screaming man. After Paul rifles through Marcy's belongings and discovers several items suggesting that Marcy is disfigured from burns, he abandons the date. Big D, it is now the Wednesday after the Super Bowl. I don't know. Did you watch this year?
Of course, yes.
Did you catch Kendrick Lamar's halftime show?
Yes, I did.
Are you a Kendrick Lamar fan?
I wouldn't say I'm a fan. I know of him. I was more a fan of when we had Dr. Dre and Snoop and Eminem a couple years ago in LA, but I know who he is.
I was late to the game on Kendrick Lamar. Like, I'll openly admit, just in the past few years, I really started listening to him. But before Not Like Us, he had a hit track called Humble. It was a few years back. Mm-hmm. And there's a line in that song. It says, I'm so fucking sick and tired of Photoshop. Show me something natural like an afro on Richard Pryor. Show me something natural like an ass with some stretch marks. I'll still take you down right on your mama couch in polo socks, which is fucking poetry to me. As I get older, though, I really feel this. Like, I'm vibing with that statement because everything is so refined now. Like, you go to a bar and it has to be clean. It has to have a theme. It has to be renovated every few years. I'm like, no, man. You need some wood paneling, a little bit of that cigarette smoke smell, a couple of beer taps, and like a TV, and you're fine. Restaurants, right? You can't just, it used to be you go and it was that, Persian restaurants especially were hideous. It was items that they found that didn't make any sense on the walls. The chairs might have tears in them. The table kind of wobbles, whatever. But now, it's industrial interiors and everything has to be spotless. And even movie stars, they have to have perfect teeth and skin. I can't think of a major motion picture star in the last few years that had, anything other than Steve Buscemi, I guess, that didn't have perfect teeth and skin. And he's really a throwback. But in this movie, dude, we get Griffin Dunne, we get Rosanna Arquette. These are the stars of the movie. Gaps in their teeth. Griffin Dunne's got a massive unibrow. He's short as fuck. This is what people look like in 1985 in New York City. And I think there's so much character to that. Like, I like when people have imperfections, you dwell on them, you're charmed by them.
Dude, what would a studio say today if Griffin Dunne came in and took his shirt off in a screen test? You saw him without his shirt on?
Yeah.
It was like a mix of hair. His nipples were kind of pink and large, and he did not look like he had worked out or he cared about what he ate. He did not look like a movie star. You're right. And normally I would say, and our listeners don't know Eugene as well as I do, that they're thinking you just want to be contrarian, that you don't like anything that is gentrified, or you don't like these homogenized chain restaurants of like Fridays in every town. But I've seen you in action, and you are genuine. You're a genuine sensory overload soul. You remember your uncle's cab, the smell of the cigarette smoke, and the vinyl seats. It's something for you that is genuine. And I think you're right. We've lost the imperfections. We've lost the ability to see the difference in things. It doesn't have to be perfect to have fun. And you said who's like the artists today that's kind of the equivalent. So I put my thinking cap on, and you're right. Steve Buscemi. You had Christopher Walken. You have William H. Macy. Danny DeVito was a box office star. Yeah. He looks like nothing, like not like a normal, anyone you would want to bank a movie on. Throw Mama from the Train. How is like that's a role that he was like the up there on the poster. You've got Ron Perlman. We've done movies about Ron Perlman, Hellboy, where he can look like he's not all there. There's a whole bunch of them. You go down the full list. Today, thinking about it, the only equivalent star I could come up with was like Adam Driver. Or Paul Dano.
But he's still hunky.
But is he really?
Those pants didn't do him any favors.
No, you got Paul Dano, who was the Riddler in The Batman, who's a bit off, or Jesse Plemons. Those guys are a bit strange, but you're right. Today, it's a very different thing. It's about how you look up on screen, and maybe it's because of the technology. Back in the day, in the movie theaters, you didn't really get to see the yellow teeth, Griffin Dunne's arms and hair, and it kind of blended into the low def. And I had mentioned earlier that this was a Scorsese film that I didn't know was a Scorsese film, and that affected the way I watched it. There's this weird psychological effect that happened to me, at least. I started watching After Hours, then I saw it was a Scorsese film, and it changed immediately how I felt about what I was seeing. Before that, it's kind of a little quirky, it's offbeat, it's a bit dark. The second that you attach Scorsese to it, everything to me seemed to be intentional. The things that were a bit odd and may have been a flaw early on, and off-kilter dialogue, maybe strange performances, immediately I'm like, wow, that's an artistic choice. It made me wonder if we had watched this without knowing the director, would we rate it the same way? In the day, this is highly acclaimed. This was a big film for him, even though it doubled what the budget was at the box office. But if people watch this without knowing who he was, it's almost as if the Stephen King effect. Stephen King used to write under a couple pseudonyms, whether the Bachman books or whatever it was that he wrote under, where people could review his books not knowing it was him. If this film was out there without knowing it was Scorsese, would people think of it the same way they do today?
Yeah, it's interesting because he was already fairly famous at the time, right? Like he really started his film career in earnest in the 70s, in the early 70s. And so it's not like he was an unknown at this point. And I feel that people had at this point understood his style, which allowed him some creative freedom. And the same worked for me. After having seen The Color of Money, I already kind of knew what to expect from Scorsese in this era, right? A lot of camera movement. And I think on that podcast, I complained about the camera movement. It was a little too much. But now, like you mentioned, Big D, I've learned that's a thing he does and that he did big time in the 80s. And so I started thinking, okay, this is an artistic choice. What is he doing here, right? And in After Hours, I think that Scorsese really demonstrated a mastery alongside the cinematographer, Michael Ballhaus. Ballhaus, not Ballhaus. The first time we hear Paul speaking on the phone with Marcy, we don't see Marcy in this shot. It's just Paul in the apartment, right? He's got the phone up to his ear and the camera pans, and it's almost like seductive the way it's panning over the phone receiver on Paul's end. And it lures you into focusing on her voice the way Paul is focusing on her voice. It's kind of hot. Like it's a distinct choice. It's artistic. But I will point out, Big D, that none of this feels ostentatious to me. Like it's not overboard. It's just art.
Yeah. And if anybody out there can show New York as a character, it's Scorsese. From his beginning, from the mean streets and Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Kings of Comedy, you mentioned this, Goodfellas. Even those are very different vibe of the film. They're darker, more violent. This is a side of him that I don't remember seeing up until this point. But he delves into the characters, and like you said, we're going to meet Paul, and you don't know if he's kind of a little offbeat, if he doesn't have any luck with the ladies. He's got this job that doesn't seem very exciting. But Paul's out there. He's going to take a chance. He had to. So he makes the move, which I think is a mistake. He gets a phone number and he immediately calls it that night, which looks a little desperate. But he goes out and he meets Marcy, and he has so many red flags, Gene, that I'm wondering at what point is he going to bail? He needs to see what's going on. Marcy, she's giving off this energy where she's unstable. She's got erratic speech. She's having mood swings. She kisses him and then starts to cry. She drops this bombshell as they're getting into bed about that she was raped for 6 hours, but slept through most of it. Then she talks about her husband. That's his place. There's the second-degree burn cream that he's wondering, where is she burned? Why is she suddenly crying? And I'm wondering, I'm like, at what point now is he going to say, I got to get out of here? And instead of that, Paul just keeps going. He doesn't seem too desperate because he seems confident, but he just takes another step. So is he like either like so hard up, or is he just being too polite like a lot of guys are?
Okay, in Paul's defense, he calls the phone number because that's the phone number to get a cream cheese bagel paperweight from Kiki. So it's not like he was calling her that night to be like, hey, what's up, girl? He was calling to start a path to a relationship by first buying a paperweight from Kiki, which would then endear him to Marcy.
So as a marketer, Gene, you're saying he was entering the funnel, the conversion?
Yeah. This is top of the funnel move. Yeah.
Top of the funnel was...
Well, it's actually mid-funnel. I guess the top of the funnel is when they met, when she said, I love that book, which to me is the first red flag.
Well, cream cheese bagels, like the paper-mâché, they're very popular. We see multiple artists. You get in there, and then down the road, you were thinking it would convert to some kind of copulation.
A big D, you asked, though, how many red flags do you ignore before you finally say, this was fun, but I'm out? I think to Paul's credit, he did say this was fun, but I'm out. Like, it took him some time, but I was proud of him. I didn't think he was going to do it because I was like, yeah, dude, you got to get out of there. And he finally did. I think we have to remember that he works all day as a word processor. And so he's worked the whole day. He's training the dude at word processing. And then he goes home. And then it's the middle of the night. And now he shows up in a neighborhood that he doesn't belong to, gets dropped off by the cab, which throws him out. He's got no money. He has 90-something cents, I guess. So then he goes into this apartment. And then he met Kiki. And he got to rub a sexy lady down. And he saw some boobies. So if you put yourself in Paul's shoes here, he's worked up.
He's worked up, yes.
He's exhausted. It's very late at night, and he's broke. I think we've all been there where you just go, maybe I'll stick around.
I 100% was in this, and I thought of the situation. At about 18 or 19, I was just starting to find my way, and I don't know where I met this girl, and she's like, hey, come over to my house. I'm like, all right. I drive there. I go outside, and I'm like, are your parents here? It was a halfway house, Gene.
Oh.
I don't know what she did, but she was forced to live there, and she had to sneak out with me. And I was immediately like, what am I doing here? But like Paul, I just kind of stuck with it. It didn't go anywhere. But when you get into that moment, you are the mix of not wanting to hurt somebody's feeling, but also seeing where it could go. And you're right. You just gotta learn from every experience. And I learned from that one.
Well, Paul attempts to go home by subway, but the fare has increased at the stroke of midnight, and he can no longer afford it after losing his $20. He goes to a bar where Julie, a server, immediately becomes enamored with him. At the bar, Paul learns that there has been a string of burglaries in the neighborhood, and the bartender, Tom, offers to give Paul money for a subway token, but Tom's unable to open the bar's cash register. So they exchange keys, and Paul agrees to go to Tom's apartment to fetch the cash register key.
So, Gene, Martin Scorsese obviously loves New York. He uses it as the canvas for a lot of his films. He knows it. He loves it. I can feel it. As the night is starting and Paul is out there in the streets, I went back to a period of my life, even though I grew up in Westchester, When I graduated college, I had gone down to work for Disney a little bit. I returned to New York in 99, and I got a job in Manhattan, in the Village, bouncing at this place called Fred's Beauty Bar. It was like a converted salon. There was a second level lounge, and it was awesome. It was the type of people that Paul is encountering throughout the day. It's the local weirdos. You never knew who was going to walk in. It could have been somebody famous. It could have also been somebody going through a manic episode. It was exciting. It was fun. The city feels alive. Every night there was a potential that it could go completely sideways. And as a bouncer, I probably should have been more fearful that something could have happened. But being like a calm voice of reason and like a bigger guy, I never had to do anything. And I think the crowd was also that more eclectic, like that. Gene, I think you would have been there. I showed you pictures of it today, and it was a lot of fun. And the way that he captures Scorsese, from the Berlin Club to all of the people interacting, you never knew where the night was going to go. You might hook up. There might be some weirdo stranger who you became friends with. And he captures the energy of the city so well.
Yeah, I had a similar era, and I totally agree. I was in Chicago, not New York, but we had our 2 a.m. bars, we had our 4 a.m. bars, and you had the people that you met on the blue line, the people that you see every night on the red line, even though you didn't know their name. And like you said, yeah, you didn't know where the night would take you. It could be that you go and meet a painter and go back to her house and see her paintings, and she's absolutely beautiful, but she's like strangely lonely to the point where you're kind of worried a little bit. Maybe she has a boyfriend, or that guy on the couch might be her roommate, but you're not going to wake him up to find out. Or one night met this millionaire. His parents died in a car accident. He was using his inheritance to fund a music career. Like, it was like, do you want to hear my CDs? And I still to this day get emails. I'm signed up on his mailing list, and I still get emails with like all of his music releases. It's wild, from that one night. Or it could be wandering into the Drake Hotel in Chicago and never quite finding out whose room you were even partying in. Like, I partied for hours until the sun came up, and I just wandered out of the hotel, went on the beach in like last night's clothes. I don't know whose room that was. I know I was invited, but that's about it. And that is the part of city life I'll always miss.
I wonder if that still goes on. We talk about the cell phone. If you have the ability to connect and to go where you truly want, I don't know if these random interactions and meetings. I've talked about before how we went into New Year's, and I think it was probably like 97, 98. We went into Times Square. We dropped acid on the train. We couldn't remember the name of the bar our friend was hosting a party. So we just walked around, met people, ended up getting in a fight, and we got kicked off the LIR. But that adventure never would have happened if we'd had the ability to text and get to the address.
So Big D, speaking of technology, I know you were an early adopter, but I recently gave in and started using ChatGPT as a search engine with mixed results. And I find it handy, no complaints. I find Google handy. I'm not saying that I want them to be gone, but lately I've been really sensitive toward this very specific thing. I find myself super annoyed when people whip out their phones instead of trying to remember a fact. Like, I find a slight joy in testing my brain, being like, what the fuck was that guy's name? And then, like, maybe after 10 minutes, everybody gives it a good shot. Then you can look it up. That's fine. There's joy in testing your brain. There's joy in exploring. And at the same time, this will sound hypocritical coming from a guy who creates his travel itineraries down to the 50-minute increment. But I believe that romance and online search are in direct opposition. Like, online search, the ability to do that has just killed romance and killed exploration. Think about Paul, his night. It goes terribly. Not a good night, right? But there's an excitement about meeting Marcy in the cafe, right? Wondering what her apartment looks like, traveling there, wondering what Kiki looks like, trying to find your way around a neighborhood you've never been. Paper-mâché bagel paperweights existing, right? You wouldn't search for that. Or just like the romantic notion of like hastily scribbling a phone number in a book that you were carrying, a real book that you were carrying. And I loved seeing this world again in After Hours. And it made me think of something I read before I traveled to Europe this last time, which was, if you look up all the places you're going online, Google Maps, YouTube, so you've already seen the food, you know what that building looks like, you've already seen that store or that park. Suddenly you're experiencing stuff digitally first. And I thought that's so weird because that means that when you get there, you're comparing it to the review or you're comparing it to the photos that you saw. And it's flipping the world on its head.
No, but that's dating. That's online dating. You just described it. You're comparing the online photoshopped image of what the person looks like. And the problem I have is that the barrier of entry into relationship today is far too low. You can swipe endlessly, keep going, and you never have to invest any skin in the game if you don't want to. You don't have to get the courage up to go to the bar, get out of your comfort zone, and talk to someone. Online, you've got this big shield in front of you. You're shopping for people online. You don't try to experiment. You don't try something that's out of your comfort zone. And Vanessa jokes with me all the time that I used to date only short girls and I used to really like African-American girls. And Vanessa talks that she is not what my traditional type of girl was. If I could go back, Gene, and talk about, let's say, 25-year-old Gene, describe your wife. How accurate or how close to Sarah would that description be, or would it be way off?
She'd be a white lady.
Okay.
That part's the same.
Okay, white lady.
No, I liked very, very thin, wafy, you might say, women. So most of the people that I've dated have been like sub 120 pounds and not short by any means, just thin. Okay. So there's that. And then I would say, very bookish, reads a lot of poetry. Probably some sort of an artist or like a literary critic or something like that, and of course goth, right? So that would be what I would imagine myself being with at that age.
I feel bad because now everyone's looking for the exact same thing. You see the girls who are like 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund. It's all focused on this similar type of person. I wonder if that little eccentric, if the Paul today gets absolutely no love. Paul can't go out like this. He might get arrested, but he's not going to have a chance to meet. He gets into like 10 people's houses.
Yeah.
He has a potential for like 6 like sexual partners. Today, Paul is alone, isolated at home in his apartment, just getting ready for work the next day.
What about the guys, Big D, who swipe right on everybody? That's kind of scary and adventurous. Now you're opening up a line of conversation with all these people.
No, but again, that's not the way it works, Gene. I read a study of it that the business model for Tinder is to get guys to pay for the premium accounts. So they can swipe 1,000 times. They're not actually making real connections. They get the premium. It is still much lower. So it is a numbers game for guys. The ladies don't see nearly a fraction of the swipes that the guys are giving.
Wait, what are they paying for?
You have to pay for a premium subscription
what do you
for
get,
the guys. It's supposed to be a higher conversion rate or somehow making more connections. So guys, if you're just using the regular, and again, I'm talking out my ass other than what I read in that study, because I don't have an account, that if people write in and tell us, if you swipe a lot as a guy, you will make very few connections unless you pay for the premium. And even then, very few convert because of the ratios of the genders.
Well, this has been Shat on Tinder. Paul spots 2 burglars, Neil and Pepe, with Kiki's man sculpture. After he confronts them, they flee, dropping the sculpture in the process. When Paul returns the sculpture to Kiki and Marcy's apartment, Kiki encourages him to apologize to Marcy, but when he enters Marcy's room, he discovers she has committed suicide. Paul reports Marcy's death before remembering his prior errand to return Tom's keys, and on the way out, he grabs a note from Kiki inviting him and Marcy to Club Berlin. So, Big D, it's been a few weeks since he passed, but you and I never really talked about the death of David Lynch. And I know that Carrie and Ash were both big fans. I definitely enjoyed the dreamlike atmosphere of some of his work in Blue Velvet, but I can't honestly say that David Lynch was like one of my favorite directors. Like I'd be full of shit, or that I understood everything he was doing. Like I think when you and I watched Blue Velvet or Dune, I can't say I understood everything that was happening. In a word, it was weird. But Scorsese, like, he's just the right amount of strange for me. And no disrespect to David Lynch, it's just I couldn't hang, right? I wasn't that cool. Scorsese, like, I'm like, what weird shit is he going to throw at me next? And he just kept the oddities coming. Whether it was Paul walking back into the terminal bar and there's just 2 leather daddies just making out.
Oh, shit.
The quirky women being invited to a conceptual art party at Berlin, like the sculptures, the burn survivor mystery. It's weird. And if this is what gets people into David Lynch, then I think that I have to say, like, Martin Scorsese is my level of David Lynch.
You're going to try to make the escape vehicle a Mr. Softy ice cream truck playing the music. And this is what I was talking about before, the Scorsese effect. I feel like when Ash and Carrie used to be like, oh, David Lynch is so brilliant, and look at what he's doing here. You could make a film and just put David Lynch's name on it, and people would start being like, wow, it's such an artistic choice. His shit was weird and didn't make sense. Here's Scorsese. His little things are sprinkled in oddities. David Lynch does shit that just doesn't make sense in any world, and that's why it seems odd. That doesn't make it good. That just makes it strange.
What is Chat the Movies' official position on David Lynch?
Oh, he's overrated.
Oh.
That's my approach.
I think that he's too cool for me to understand.
No, you've been sold that, Gene. Don't believe the propaganda. You've been indoctrinized. Don't, Gene. You've been told he's this genius. Don't. Gene, break out of the cult.
In reading about him after his passing, though, I did hear several people say that Twin Peaks is the appropriate, like, gateway drug to Lynch. You don't start with the movies. You start with Twin Peaks and then work your way to the movies. And I went straight in with Blue Velvet. So maybe not the right one.
No, put down the pipe, Gene.
Well, the bar is locked when Paul arrives, with a sign stating that Tom will return shortly. Paul runs into Julie on the street, and she invites him up to her apartment. Paul is unnerved by Julie's strange behavior, including sketching him while they talk. When he leaves the apartment, a scorned Julie makes wanted posters for the anonymous burglar using her sketch of Paul. He finally returns to the bar, where Tom receives a phone call that his girlfriend Marcy has killed herself. Yes, that Marcy. Paul leaves to find Kiki and inform her of Marcy's suicide. The bouncer at Club Berlin refuses him entry because his hairstyle does not fit the Mohawk dress code. And Paul narrowly escapes several punks who attempt to give him a haircut. So, Big D, you talked about that nightlife in Manhattan. And I think to the viewing public, Berlin is supposed to be like a scary place where like punk rockers are going to grab you and shave your head into a mohawk while you're getting slammed into chain link fences and you don't know who's a man and who's a woman. That place is fucking rad.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're playing Bad Brains. They're slam dancing. Like Martin Scorsese is in this scene. He's up on a platform in like a military uniform and he's shining a spotlight on people. And this club looks amazing. You can really tell that Scorsese loved New York City in 1985, and he wanted to show what it really looked like in a hardcore bar. Like some of those were actors, but some of those were actually people on the scene in New York in the 80s. And I find that amazing.
I think one of the fun things about big cities is you can find a variety of clubs. When I was growing up, I've talked about the Tunnel before, that we used to go and do ecstasy, and it had all the different rooms, the fuzzy room, and it was where the kids movie was filmed there. But there was also another place that we went once, or tried to. It was down in the meatpacking district. It was called the Vault. It was this S&M, like this dungeon. We ended up only getting down into the entrance. And then I think they suspected that we were too normie for it, and they made us leave. But there was cages, there was bondage. That's the fun thing about New York. It's a fun thing about big cities. I remember when we went to New Orleans, some of the smaller places that you got us into, it was a quirky crowd. I remember, what was the name of the place you took us? You said the music is going to be great.
DBA.
Place was great. I never would have stopped there as a tourist. It was fun. And it was New York. There's nothing like it, I think, because you have such a mixed group of people. And I think New York gets a bad rap. Paul, this is a guy who's struggling to get home. And he somehow manages, he's a New Yorker, to find strangers who are willing to take him in. He just goes up to them on the street and says, hey, can you help me? Sure. What do you need? Do you need a couple bucks? No. Can I go home with you? Oh, okay. Somehow he convinces, it's probably like 10 or 12 people to take him home, go to their apartment, go to the club, go to their work. And Paul runs into this guy, Robert, which is my favorite interaction of strangers, which befriend Paul. It's this guy in the street, and Paul's as hit rock bottom. He goes up to him and he says, listen, please. I've never done this before. Please, can you help me? And he goes, what do you need? He goes, I want you, can you take me home with you? And the guy's like, all right. He goes, listen, but I've never done this with a man before. Paul is not shocked. Paul is not disgusted. Paul is just like, please, can I just sleep here? And he starts going on to the full recounting of the horror of the night, Gene. It was like, what was the movie where the guys get the RV and they go into Chicago?
Judgment Night.
It was like Judgment Night level, or Adventures in Babysitting. The misadventures that he has gone on, and the New Yorkers are helping. They're taking care of him. Yes, some of them try to chase him down at the end, try to beat him up, try to kill him. But honestly, Gene, in what other city would an oddball like Paul be able to interact and befriend so many like diverse people willing to help him and be taken into their home like a friend?
Big D, you and I are both New Yorkers. You know, I would never besmirch the name of New York State or city. But I want to note that although the people of New York are much kinder and accommodating than people think they are, everyone in this movie had an agenda. Like they either wanted Paul to love them or help them or hear them. Paul, in the same evening, nearly has his hair forcibly removed. He's sealed in a paper-mâché sarcophagus.
Mm-hmm.
He's chased by an angry mob, as you mentioned, and he's ripped off by a cabbie. Like, I don't know if that's people being nice.
It sounds like a fucking dynamite night, Gene. He could have been stuck out in the street. That's a great night, Gene. He's also gotten 3 or 4 women into bed who want to have sex with him, Gene.
That's true. I mean, look at him, though.
It was dark. They didn't have very good lights back then, so people couldn't really gauge whether Paul was attractive or not, but that was a great thing for Paul. He was living a life.
Well, back on the street yet again, Paul meets a Mr. Softy ice cream truck driver named Gail, who mistakes him for the burglar based on Julie's posters. Gail and a mob of locals relentlessly pursue Paul, who seeks refuge at the club. He uses his last quarter to play Is That All There Is by Peggy Lee on the club's jukebox and asks an older woman named June to dance. After he explains the situation, June offers to hide him in her apartment underneath the club, where she uses paper-mâché to disguise Paul as a sculpture. The paper-mâché hardens, trapping him in a position that resembles Kiki's sculpture. Neil and Pepe then break in and steal Paul, thinking that he's the sculpture they had dropped in the street earlier. As their van speeds uptown, Paul falls out to the pavement directly outside the front gate of his office building. With no way to go home, he brushes himself off and goes to his desk, where the computer screen greets him for another day of work.
So, Gene, in the beginning, we thought Paul, maybe he'll get to meet Marcy and hook up. That'll be the best he could do. He hits the jackpot, Gene. He has got a variety of choices. There's a lot of women in After Hours. Yes, they all bring a different level of chaos, but he's got a pick of some really interesting women. And some of them, like, were the least dangerous to me. And the most intriguing to me was a famous face we've become accustomed to. It is Catherine O'Hara. This is Home Alone mom. This is Kevin McAllister's mom. We also get Terry Garr, who's from Mr. Mom. We also have Catherine O'Hara was in Beetlejuice. So we're seeing younger versions of these characters. I'm liking the Catherine O'Hara. She's doesn't have the scars. She doesn't have the emotional breakdowns. She is a bit odd and a bit aggressive with him. But, you know, Paul, he's got the choice then of Kiki, you mentioned, who he's gotten topless and she fell asleep mid-flirt. She stalks a bit later, but she's got another guy. So he's got like this really like weird group of women. And I wanted to talk to you and see if we could break these down because people haven't seen them. For a guy who was just trying to maybe hook up with one, that was Marcy. And Marcy is the one we described, the manic one, unstable, tragic backstory, rough night, kills herself, right? But before the killing, Gene. So that's option 1. 2, Kiki, wild artist. She's physically into Paul. She's taking her top off, paper-mâchéing, very physical, very, very tactile and like touchy. Then we have Julie. This is the sweet actress. She wants a better life. She's drawn to Paul's like simple and his innocence. Then we have Gail, which was Catherine O'Hara. She's enthusiastic. She drives the Mr. Softy truck, but you don't want to wrong this woman. And then finally we get June. This is the mysterious woman at the end, the older woman, spoiler alert, who ultimately saves Paul. But of these choices, Gene, I've already said, I found myself attracted to Gail. Who would you go for?
100% Kiki. Assuming that Horst is open to having like an open relationship, because I don't want to run afoul of Horst. But Kiki, I mean, she's everything you want. She's hardworking. Like, she works well into the night. She passed out because she was tired, Big D. She'd been working too hard. She's fun. She's sexy. She dresses awesome. She's got a great haircut. And she lives in that sweet-ass loft. You know how hard it is to find a loft like that in Manhattan?
Well, that's I think that was Marcy's husband's loft. But regardless, would you be okay sharing Kiki with Horst?
Yeah, that's fine.
So you'd be okay, the three of you being intimate, you, Horst, and Kiki?
Yeah, I mean, Horst was there first.
Oh, I would love to paper-mâché that act. I would sit in the side and do a live paper-mâché. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rest of, I feel that I'm biased against June. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. Call me ageist, I guess. And Gail was certainly dangerous. I think it's an easy choice. Also, as you pointed out, Marcy's dead.
Yeah, so Marcy's off the table.
Yeah.
Okay, so of the four, yes.
On the table.
True. But I'm offended that you're an ageist for June, because I find as I get older, the first thing to go on me was to be able to gauge other people's age. When I look at actors, actresses, somebody out on the street, a coworker, I probably at this point cannot get you within 5 years of their actual age. When June comes up, it's an actress, Verna Bloom. I'm looking at her. I'm like, okay, how old is she? I'm like, I'm 51. I'm like, she's got to be at least like 55, 56. I would have bet my life on it, Gene. I, of course, Google it. She was 46 years old, Gene. Now, granted, they have her hair done and the makeup maybe to make her look older. But this woman, her face looked a little bit leathered. It seems like in the 80s and 90s, there was maybe it was the advances in skin care. Maybe it was something in the water. I don't know, but she did not look 55. I didn't even consider her, even though she's in shape. She looks like she's got some money, maybe, but she did not, Gene, look like she was 46 years old.
Yeah, I agree, Big D. I think she was supposed to look older, like they dressed her up that way, but I never would have guessed that this woman, I mean, she's basically my age. Like, I would never guess that we were in the same age group. And the strange part is, paradoxically, like, I think people today, even though they look younger, I think they're less concerned with looking older now, right? I feel like people are much more comfortable. Guys going bald, going gray, like, it's no big deal. Women going gray, not a big deal. I started thinking like maybe it's like it's a curve associated with life expectancy, right? So like, follow me on this. Mm-hmm. In the 80s, like you'd be lucky if you lived to like your 70s. So people, there's a point where you just go, oh, fuck it. You let it go. I'm not trying to look cool anymore. I'm not trying to look good. Right. And then that's when you start to look old. And they just hit it earlier because they're like, well, I'm 75% way through life. Let it go.
I think a lot of it has to do, and again, I might be stretching here. There's no scientific data to back my hypothesis or my theory, but I think when people have kids younger, they miss out on a part of their younger days where they have to be an adult quicker, ages them. Where now the friends that I have that have had children later in life and have lived their life free of children, because children, well, let's be honest, children suck the life out of you. Doing it later in life, Gene, it's a good thing. I think maybe that's why today, as people are waiting longer to have kids, I think that helps, conserve your battery.
But if you had the kid younger, wouldn't you have more of you to suck?
No, I think you just would have given up on life much sooner. You would never see, because your friends are out partying, they're having fun, they're meeting cool people in the city. They're running from ice cream trucks and bandits, and they're hiding in paper mache. The other people, they're sitting home, Gene, babysitting, hating their life, and wondering why this happened to them instead of out having fun. That's the reason. But at the end, as I told you, Gene, the movie's starting to come to an end, and I'm wondering, where the hell is this going to end? You've had Paul out in the streets, his misadventures. Are we going to see him get home? Is there going to be some clean bow to tie this up? And it ends in what I think is the perfect way that I never would have predicted. I never would have predicted that Paul gets paper-mâchéd into a sculpture is then stolen by Cheech and Chong, driven away in like an ice cream truck or a box van, falls out the back right in front of his work, Gene. As they're opening up for the next day of work, Paul didn't make it home. It's been a full 24 hours. He just puts his head down, goes into his office, and sits down at a job. He is a word processor, Gene. I thought at first when we met him that he was doing some form of stocks or maybe he was an editor for a book. But no, his job as a word processor, as I believe it, Gene, in 85, was just to type words, like data entry. Is that correct?
It's basically a typist, but with a computer. It's like the equivalent of somebody who would do like a Word doc or a PowerPoint or a PDF for you. But basically, if you need a document created inside the computer, you would hire a word processor.
Oh, so he would get like maybe like a handwritten manuscript like Betty Blue, and he would type it into the computer. And at the day, this must have been like some high-tech job.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, Paul, I heard you got a job over there at that that new computer company. What do you do? Oh, I'm a word processor. It's like today, you think with AI, the people who are all worried about it taking their jobs. I'm sure that word processors, Gene, in 85 thought they were guaranteed work for the next 30, 40 years. They said, everything's going to be you're going to need to put it into a computer. I'm guaranteed. How many jobs today are going to be like that? The technology, it just poof, they're gone. It's got to
never have to work again. Just saying.
It's happening, Gene. It's coming. There's going to be AI podcasters. I think we only have maybe 6 months left.
Yeah, they exist.
Are we AI? How do we know, Gene? Are we in the Matrix?
If you can't tell the difference, does it matter?
It doesn't matter, people.
All right. Well, now it's the time of the podcast to give our shot score. Sorry. Well, now
How's that edible, Gene? How's that edible, Gene? Do you want to give it a review?
Dude, it's hitting. It is.
It is? What is the type? Is it sativa? What type of edible?
It's a half THC CBD, 1-to-1.
1-to-1?
Not
5 milligrams?
1-to-1.
Do you want to give a review, Gene, before we hit the movie? What's your shot score for your gummy? For your gummy. As I'm drinking my Royal Crown Blackberry and Coke.
I feel like in Titanic, don't let go, Jack. But I am Jack, trying to hold on to reality.
You're doing well. So how many wipes is your gummy?
That's like a scale of 1 to 1.
1 to 5.
This gummy is I'm gonna say it's like a 4 wiper, man.
Oh Jesus! Okay, let's tie this up.
It took me way over the edge.
Okay, so let's get out of here then. Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap it up then.
Well, now is the time in the podcast we give our chat score for After Hours. Chat scores are our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It's when Soho had 2,000 square foot lofts for $3,000 a month. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a film. It's when you take off and she kills herself. Big D, let's start with you, because I'm not ready to go yet. What is your chat score for After Hours?
So, Gene, I think for a Scorsese film, I found myself just wondering on set, because Scorsese, he likes violence. Was there a moment where he's like, could I sneak in a bat attack? Somebody getting their head split open, somebody getting shot. No, he showed restraint. Nobody was. Well, yes, there was a murder, Gene.
Yeah, there's a murder.
There was. Besides Marcy, you got the dude who gets killed by his wife or girlfriend, and Paul says, "I'll probably get blamed for that." Yes, so Scorsese couldn't even help himself, Gene. We had another murder on screen, but I think it starts off slow. It was a bit odd in the beginning, the ridiculous situations. But the quirky characters, as they kept reappearing, as they kept building on the relationships, and the loops of the people kept just escalating to this level that I never thought it would. Is it the greatest film? No. Is it Scorsese's best? No. But it's unique. Everything is wrapped up at the end. I think it's slightly better than average. I don't think it was what I expected going in. But for Scorsese, this was a stretch. This was something very different than what I'd seen from him. I think it's 2 wipes.
I think I might really just like early weird Scorsese more than gangster Scorsese. Like the era that I was introduced with him, I thought he was good. but not great, right? Now, after watching these 80s movies, I think he's pretty great. This movie, it captures 80s Manhattan. It captures those nights spent looking for romance or that weird feeling you get when you're with a woman and the red flags start flying. And we talked last week with Three Kings about dark comedy and what a dark comedy is. And I couldn't quite put my finger on why I like certain ones or felt certain ones were truly dark comedies and other ones were action movies or dramas with like a joke or two thrown in. I think that I needed this moment to sit with After Hours, recalibrate with a proper dark comedy. And this is ultimately what a dark comedy should look like. It's 1.5 Wives for me.
Jesus Christ, Gene. Do you know that Etsy has an entire category for plaster of Paris bagel and cream cheese paperweights?
I'm not surprised at all.
I just found your Christmas gift, Gene.
Thank you.
Spoiler alert.
Thank goodness. Now all the papers won't go flying all about my office.
You'll be able to keep your $20 bills down, yes.
Well, Big D, with 2 wipes from you, 1.5 wipes from me, that gives us an average wipe score of 1.75 wipes for After Hours.
So I don't know how much of this is the edibles or my my Crown Royal Blackberry, but it's now tied up there with some memorable films from the time. At 138, this now ties it with Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, Halloween 4, which was our favorite, Drop Dead Gorgeous, which was surprisingly well received, Friday, and I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. So it's even though it's not the lowest wipe score, it's still up there pretty high.
Yeah, I think based on Robin's expectations, it did pretty well. Well, Robin, thank you for the commission. Big D, before we close out, we do have some voicemail and email tonight, and the first one comes from Tom in Midland, Texas.
Tom, Midland, Texas. I was calling in. I didn't realize that the voicemail cut me off. And all I said on the part that cut off was I wish Gene and all of his family a very merry, happy Christmas and a very happy, happy New Year. And Big D and all of his family a very merry, merry Christmas and a very happy, happy New Year. And I also said that if you guys are ever in Midland, Texas, I would love to get together and go have some fun in the area. There's some decent bars in the area. And the last thing I said was I'm on dialysis and I request that hopefully you guys will all send me good thoughts and wishes on getting a kidney transplant. And other than that, I was going to say have a great week, and I will talk to you all later. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll take a quick turn. Tom's trying to get us to go to a bar in Midland with him, and then he drops the dialysis and the kidney on us.
Yeah, Tom, that one really blindsided us, but way to bury the lead, buddy.
Tom, please, buddy, start with that. You're our friend. Let us know what we can do. We'll go beyond thoughts and prayers.
Let's 100%, Tom. If there's anything we could do to help, just let us know, write or call. And we won't, let us know if you don't want it on the air. That's okay. I don't want you to we're not going to share your information like that, but definitely let us know how we can help. And as far as the Christmas wishes goes, thank you so much, Tom. I've had this one in the vault for a bit and just waiting for the right time to pop it out, but wish you a Merry Christmas as well. And thank you so much for your kind words.
Yes. And Tom, of course we will think of you, and anything we can do for you to try to help. I had my brother-in-law, Frank, who had the lung and liver transplant. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the process is. I know you get on the list and they rank you depending on like survivability and a whole bunch of factors. So I don't know necessarily what we could do to help promote Tom, but of course, yeah, anything you could do, to let us know, Tom. We would be glad to help because you're part of the family.
Well, thanks, Tom, for your voicemail. Next up, we have an email from Braylon, and it's another invitation. It says, Gene, longtime listener, fan of the show. I heard on the previous podcast that you and your wife will be traveling to Louisville for Country Thunder and maybe another event. I'm in hotel management, and my company has properties in downtown. If you haven't found lodging as of now, please let me know and I may be able to help. If not, enjoy your time, and maybe we can all have a beer. If Big D can make it, I will help him also. Let me know. Thank you for all that you do, Braylon. Well, Braylon, I may be coming through Louisville on the Chop Top Challenge in March, and Big D may be coming along. But other than that, Sarah and I are thinking of another time to come out there, so I will definitely let you know. It'll either be for Thunder or maybe for Thanksgiving. So I'll definitely keep in touch. Thank you so much. And if you have an offer of lodging for us, you can email us, host@chatpod.com. Well, that wraps it up for email and voicemail. Big D, what do you have coming up next week?
Gene, next week's film is an important moment in 80s and 90s film and technology. It was a film that led the way for a lot of the big hits that we have reviewed. It's from one of the biggest directors of our time. And this was a film that blew my mind. And I'm excited that we're finally getting back to go and review it. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio are formerly married petroleum engineers who still have some issues to work out. They are drafted to assist a gung-ho Navy SEAL with a top-secret recovery operation. A nuclear sub has been ambushed and sunk under mysterious circumstances in some of the deepest water on Earth. Commissioned by Steve F., came out in '89, directed by James Cameron, and the technology from this film that was developed changed the history of film.
Well, Steve, thank you for commissioning the upcoming movie. Thank you to Robin for commissioning After Hours. And thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes... Fucking A.
And thank you to those who create the gummies, which help many people sleep at night.
I don't know if I'm going to be sleeping ever. That concludes this week's episode of Chat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Chat the Movies. You can email us, host@chatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all the information by visiting our website, chatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Chat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all the information on our website, chatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next time for the following movie.
It began 2 years ago in an unfinished nuclear power plant. It became one of the most challenging motion pictures ever made. And on August 9th, the most original adventure of the summer will begin at theaters everywhere. From James Cameron, the writer and director of The Terminator and Aliens, comes The Abyss.
God, I hate that bitch.
Probably shouldn't have married her then, huh?
Hang on, gentlemen.
Here's a bottomless pit, baby. 2.5 miles straight down.
A dance of light. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I don't think they mean us any harm. I don't know how I know that.
Whatever happens, it's up to us. That guy scares me more than anything that's down there.
But we all see what we want to see. Coffee looks and he sees hate and fear. You have to look with better eyes than that.
Talk to me, bud, please.
Do you hear me?
He's coming up fast.
I need to know if you're okay. You can't leave me here alone.
You never backed away from anything in your life. Now fight!
Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Chat the Movies. You can email us, host@chatpod.com. Support the podcast. Fuck. I do not like it. Okay. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link.